dressing room fighting. It was toxic in a lot of ways. I tried to help Gary and the team, but in the end it became evident that even though Steve had caused a lot of issues, that I was going to be the one that got picked on. 6 or 7 players made a complaint about Tim Breslin that year, but I was the only one that got the repercussions of that, and I was the only person of colour.
There was sorry to quick question, Mr. Rafiki, but there was my reading of your witness statement, also the report more generally, which is quite a difficult read due to the way it's constructed, but my reading of it is that effectively the attitude of Yorkshire changed almost like a light switch going off the moment you made a complaint about racial harassment. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I first raised it as bullying in 2017. I've seen board minutes now a month before, and it calls me as the leader, potential captain, driver on the field, someone that potentially we should build a team around, especially in white ball cricket. I raised that complaint about Tim Breslin, and Tim, former England cricketer, also related to the coach. I knew there was potentially going to be real trouble, but I thought, I mean, everyone complained, so it will be the same for everyone. But on the flip side of it, the board minutes say I'm a problem, a troublemaker, and an issue that needs to be resolved. And I feel that then blinded them into how they treated me through the pregnancy and the loss of my son. My first day back after losing my son, Martin Moxon literally got me in a room and ripped the shreds off me. I've never seen him speak to anyone like that through my time at the club. And I couldn't believe it. And really, me raising the complaints that I did at the time internally, reporting mechanisms, I raised it with the National Asian Cricket Council, I raised it with the PCA, with my PDM, who I thought, Personal Development Manager,
okay,
who I thought was on my side until I read the internal emails. I raised it with the Inclusivity and Diversity board member. I went to his house, Hanif Malik, and literally cried my eyes out. And he said to me that he's going to deal with this and he doesn't need the job. 4 days later, I got a message from him that he's going to let Mark Arthur know that I've been, just to be transparent. The subject data access request actually showed that the minute I left his house, he rang Mark and informed him of everything before the meeting I had with Mark the next day.
Now, in terms of the handling of your complaint, I mean, obviously, you know, there's huge issues there in terms of the internal handling, the fact that your identity was revealed to the individual you were complaining about, presumably, which is against practice. But also, what are your views about the report and the way in which it's structured? Because I understand it was a law firm who Mr. Hutton, I believe, used to work for, conducted the inquiry, and then the panel, which oversaw that inquiry, effectively some members of those had to step down, and 3 members were left. And reading the report, it's a bit of sort of a Venn diagram of stupidity, actually, in the way in which it's structured, because you've got sort of like moments where in which hearsay is effectively given. You know, for example, Zimba is presumed to be racist while the P word is not. That's an example of the sort of thinking that goes on in this report, and the way in which it also tends to have the panel contradicting the law firm and vice versa. What is your views about how that was handled, and basically what did you think when you first sort of clapped eyes on it?
I mean, I only got it a week ago.
Yeah.
Seems like some people that had been accused, upheld stuff against, got my stuff before I even got it, and they used the platform at the Daily Telegraph to show the world that. From the offset, what I wanted to do is try and talk about the institution, try and talk about what I went through, and try and present my evidence in a way that it can be seen as, look, there's things that are not right and we can really all learn from it, and what's happened to me has happened. It'll never change. But my aim was to try and see if my experience can help others. Clearly, the word institutional is something no one wants to be institutional racism is something no one wants to be associated with. And I mean, the lawyers, Squire Patton Boggs, having connection with Roger from the offset, set Sean on a bad road. They were brilliant. They were lovely at the start. So respectful, wanted to hear everything I had to say. The panel led by a surgeon. Again, as soon as they got my evidence, it felt like they were like, wow, we've got a problem here. And suddenly it felt like it went away from the institutional and working with the club, they tried to make it about individuals. And that's why, unfortunately, the last couple of weeks, some individuals have had a really tough time. But I didn't present my evidence like that. It was never intended like that, and that was never the allegation. But that's what the club, the lawyers, and the panel in particular have tried to do. I mean, to make one thing very clear, Paki is not banter. Racism is not banter. And for a person of colour, I think there's 3 people of colour on that panel, and one of them, Chief Executive, I think he's associated with National Asian Cricket Council and CEO of London Tigers, an award-winning charity organisation working with rugby and football clubs. For him to come out and do an article where he stands by the finding that Paki was used as banter, it just shows the scale of the problem we have.
There's a report, in the report, there's mentions made of your drinking, that you were a heavy drinker during your time at Yorkshire. What is your view of then linking your claims of harassment to your drinking?
Well, look, I've been clear from the offset. I wasn't perfect. There's things I did I felt I had to do to fit in and try and achieve my dreams. And I'm not proud of them. It's something I deeply regret. But it has no relation to racism. I should have never ever been treated the way I got treated. When I spoke, I should have been listened to. But Yorkshire County Cricket Club and the game as a whole really has a problem in listening to the victim, and it's been gaslighting. It's been but there is no but to racism. There is no 2 sides to a story when it comes to racism.
Were you ever forced to drink alcohol before you were 18 by other people at the club, and how do you view the harassment you suffered for undertaking answering the call for prayer?
Yeah, look, my first instance of drinking, I actually got pinned down at my local cricket club, and red wine got poured down my throat.
How old were you?
15.
15, you're a Muslim, 15.
15-year-old, I got literally down my throat. The player played for Yorkshire, played for Hampshire, and yeah, it was quite a experience. I didn't touch alcohol till about around 2012, and around that time I felt like I had to do that to fit in. Like I said, I regret that massively, but again, it has no bearings on the things that I was called, and really around the loss of my son, the sort of attitude of Andrew Gale, the coach, saying to me that I'm making it more than what it is before the loss. After the loss, hardly ever anyone saying, actually, mate, are you all right? Is your wife all right? It was all about, well, he raised bullying last year. Before he raises something big, let's get rid of him.
And the harassment over the call to prayer as well, that you've seen? Yeah,
look, obviously, myself, I don't remember having that, but I know certain other people. I've seen another player fasting, for example, and if he made a mistake while fasting, from the strength and fitness conditioning coach to the physio to coaches and fellow players would be blaming him for any mistakes he made, as opposed to actually understanding
that's at Yorkshire.
That's at Yorkshire, yeah.
Okay. Tell us about Kevin and Steve, and what those names signify in Yorkshire cricket.
Well, look, Steve. Once I left the club, Cheteshwar Pujara joined the club, and Jack Brooks, I think, started it where he didn't feel the need to call him by his first name. There is an interview with Cheteshwar where he said, I'd prefer them not to. But not only did Jack, the coaches, everyone else, the media, Yorkshire Post, the Yorkshire website, the Yorkshire Twitter page, everyone called him that. Commentators around the world, some high-profile people. It just shows, again, back to what the institutional failings and what that environment showed people and how they could behave. So that was a Steve point. Kevin was something Gary used to describe everyone of colour in a very derogatory manner, whether that be publicly, whether that be within the dressing room, whether that be opposition. This is an open secret within the England dressing room. This is anyone that's come across Gary would know that that's a phrase he used to describe people of colour. It was used in a derogatory manner all the time.
So you're saying there that effectively in the England dressing room they used the name Kevin to signify people of Afro-Caribbean origin, is that correct?
Anyone of colour.
Anyone of colour.
Anyone of colour.
And is it true that there is an England cricketer as well named his black dog, Kevin, as an in-joke?
Yeah, that is true, because Gary and Alex Hales at the time got really close to each other when they played for England together, and that's my understanding. Obviously I wasn't present in that dressing room, but that's why I understand that Alex went on to name his dog Kevin because it was black.
How do you view that?
Well, it's disgusting, to be honest, how much of a joke it was. As I said, till right at the end, I was in complete denial as to what was going on. It was only around back end of 2017, and when I lost my son, I went, you know what, hold on a minute. I've seen other players who have family tragedies and get support beyond measure, and I've just carried my son from the hospital to the graveyard, and how I'm getting treated here is not right. And to me, it became very clear that even myself, that I'd been looking the other way. And there's a real problem here, not just Yorkshire, throughout the country. And I'm going to be the one that's going to speak about this.
Thank you. Azim, you just mentioned obviously not just Yorkshire. We know we've seen instances, reports with Essex very recently. Obviously there's rumours always fly around about other counties as well. So would you be fair to say that what you've seen in Yorkshire, is it on the grapevine, in fact, is it replicated in other counties?
Without a shadow of a doubt. This is a problem up and down the country. I think I would like to see it as progress, that people are feeling like they can come forward and they're going to be heard and not just be discredited, smeared about, briefed about. I think I would see that as a progress. I mean, if you look at the stats, British Asian representation in professional cricket since 2010 has had a drop of nearly 40%. The recreational game has over 30% representation from the British Asian, and that drops to a mere 4% at professional level. Now, you can do all the PR initiatives that the ECB, PCA, the counties do and tell everyone how great you are, or you can actually look into the problem. Within our community...
Yes, well, morning everybody. You are listening there to Azim Rafiq's testimony in the Department for Culture, Media and Sport in relation to racism allegations around Yorkshire County Cricket Club. Of course, a story that's been dominating headlines in recent weeks. Also, as you heard there, he's gone on to discuss issues potentially, allegedly, in the England setup and indeed at county cricket as a whole. Some pretty disturbing things there, obviously. He's certainly very passionate about his particular case, and I suppose as he sees it anyway, an endemic problem of racism in county cricket.
Yes, and he's, as you can see, we've been watching, been getting very emotional there. I believe that the former chairman, Roger Hutton, will also be giving evidence to the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee. So we'll be bringing you all the highlights on that with our Yorkshire and the Humber reporter, Kevin Larking, a bit later on, but we'll leave that there for now.
Yes, well, look, keep your thoughts all coming in. Obviously, we'll be getting to the meat and bones of this show very, very shortly. GB Views at gbnews.uk. We'll be back with some of today's top stories and plenty of your views after the break and the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good morning. A duller day today across Scotland and Northern Ireland, with a bit of rain for a time as well, and blustery. Meanwhile, for most of England and Wales, a largely dry day again, if fairly cloudy. But there is some fog around this morning, quite thick in places as well, so just bear that in mind for the morning commute. This weather system moving into the northwest, though, will bring the rain. Notice the isobars squeezing together as well, so it's been a windy night across the northwest, and it's turning wetter on the west coast of Scotland as well. Some mist and fog, particularly across parts of East Anglia and southern England, but that is steadily going to clear. It will stay predominantly cloudy for England and Wales, but the vast majority will also stay dry. Spell of rain through the middle of the day for Northern Ireland, turning drier through the afternoon. At the same time, a band of really squally showers will pep up in the far northwest. Another pretty mild day, especially in the south. A bit of brightness, could see temperatures climbing easily into the teens. A windy evening then, with further showers coming into western Scotland, turning to snow over the tops of the hills. A bit of patchy rain for northern England and Wales, but again, that kind of fizzles out as it slips further south. And it will be something of a colder night. Temperatures more widely, certainly across the far north, down to single figures, but enough of a breeze to stop temperatures falling too far. On to the details for Wednesday, and a brighter day for the south. Bit more sunshine likely here and some blue sky as well. There will be showers coming at times for northwest England, North Wales and certainly western Scotland. The odd one for Northern Ireland, but many southern and eastern parts having a dry, fine day on Wednesday. It will be breezy, and that breeze will bring a chillier day. Temperatures, though, still around about average for the time of year, 10 to 11 degrees Celsius. Some rain trickling into Northern Ireland late on, and that will be around across western Scotland on Thursday, but a lot of dry weather through the rest of the week and into the weekend. Staying mild as well, but signs of things turning colder through the weekend.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Good morning, you're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Mercy Maroki. We're here all the way through until midday with, as ever, a show full of the day's biggest stories.
And lots of discussion on the issues you care about as well, so make sure you get in touch with your views. gbviews@gbnews.uk, our usual email, and we'll get to those throughout the show. But first, let's give you the latest news.
Hello, I'm Simon Pusey. This is your news at 10 o'clock. NHS organisations have been asked to review their security arrangements after the Liverpool terrorist attack. The 4 men arrested in relation to the taxi explosion have now been released from police custody. The bombing suspect who died in Sunday's car blast has been named as 32-year-old Emad Al-Swealim. The driver, David Perry, survived the incident and has since been discharged from hospital. The terrorism threat level in the UK has been increased to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. Minister for Security and Borders, Damien Hines, told GB News people should be as vigilant as possible.
If you see something that doesn't look right, something that makes you suspicious about something, just to go that extra mentally, go that extra distance to say, yeah, I should report that. And if it turns out to not be significant, then nothing's been lost.
Well, as we've been hearing, Azim Rafiq says Yorkshire County Cricket Club has labelled him a troublemaker as soon as he brought the behaviour of senior players to the attention of management. He's appearing before MPs this morning to discuss allegations of institutional racism at the club. The club's former player initially voiced his claims in September 2020. An investigation by Yorkshire concluded Mr Rafiq was a victim of racial harassment and bullying, but nobody was disciplined. The club's former chairman, Roger Hutton, who quit in the aftermath of the row, will also give evidence to the Digital, Culture, Media and Sport Committee. NHS leaders are calling for social care staff to be given cash bonuses to stop them from leaving to other jobs in the winter. They want the government to offer £500 incentives so they don't take Christmas work in hospitality, supermarkets or firms like Amazon. Those working in care homes must now be double vaccinated. The sector already has more than 100,000 vaccines. An attempt to scrap the controversial standards reforms that sparked Westminster's sleaze row has been blocked by a Conservative MP. Last night's Commons motion endorsed the standards report, which concluded Owen Paterson had broken lobbying rules, leaving the standards system intact. But Tory MP Christopher Chope objected.
We now come to a motion relating to the Committee on Standards, and I call the Minister to move formally. Object. Objection taken.
A debate on standards is on today's Commons agenda. Former Labour MP Stephen Pound told GB News that sleaze is endemic.
And there are some people who are still trying to justify with this most sort of egregious nonsense, this risible theory that somehow, having being a spokesperson for a hedge fund actually adds lustre to the cluster, actually makes you somehow a better MP. Absolute nonsense.
The Prime Minister's father has been accused of inappropriately touching a Tory MP and a journalist. Caroline Noakes, MP, said Stanley Johnson smacked her on the backside in 2003 and Alva Ray claimed he groped her in 2019. Mr Johnson declined to comment but says he has no recollection of Caroline Noakes at all. The majority of school staff, parents and students believe GCSEs need to be reformed. A poll by the Headmasters and Headmistresses Conference found that more than half say GCSEs require serious reform and 40% believe they need some adjustment. It reported significant concern that both the curriculum and assessment are falling short in serving the needs of young people. UK rents are rising at the fastest pace since 2008. Property website Zoopla reported rents in September were 4.6% higher than a year earlier at £968 per month on average. This signals the strongest growth in 13 years. The property company said demand is continuing to outstrip supply and putting an upward pressure on rents. A group of Insulate Britain activists could be jailed for allegedly breaching court injunctions. The High Court has so far issued 5 injunctions banning road-blocking protests on the M25, around Doverport and on major London roads. Those in breach could face a maximum penalty of 2 years in prison or an unlimited fine. 9 people are appearing at the High Court this morning. Insulate Britain says it intends to continue with the protests until the government agrees to insulate homes. Harry Kane scored 4 times as England thrashed San Marino 10-0 to secure World Cup qualification. That means the Tottenham striker goes level with Gary Lineker on 48 England goals. Only Sir Bobby Charlton and Wayne Rooney are ahead of him on the all-time scorers list. And you are right up to date. I'll have more headlines for you in half an hour. Now it's back to The Point with Patrick and Mercy.
Good morning. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's. We've got a show full of all of today's big stories and lots of discussion on the issues you care about. So here's what's on the menu.
Yes, well, in the aftermath of Sunday's explosion, the country's terror threat has now been raised to severe. GB News understands that the terrorist bomber, killed when his device exploded in the back of a Liverpool taxi, was not known to the security services. The 4 men arrested have since been released. Our Home and Security editor Mark White will bring us the very latest on this investigation.
Yes, and as England's football team are Qatar-bound after securing their place at the 2022 World Cup following an emphatic 10-0 win against San Marino, and Harry Kane cements his place in history as well. We'll be asking what place the tournament will have in history, given accusations of modern slavery and human rights abuses across Qatar, prompting calls for a World Cup boycott.
Yes, and the eastern leg of the high-speed railway HS2 between the Midlands and Leeds is set to be scrapped in the rail plan, which is to be announced on Thursday, according to government sources. We'll bring you the latest on one of the country's biggest and most expensive infrastructure projects.
Yes, we have all of that coming up and much more across the programme, and you can get in touch as usual with your views, GB Views at gbnews.uk. But first, Patrick gives his views on our politicians' complacency towards terrorism.
I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of the complacency in this country when it comes to terror. I'm sick and tired of how normalised terror attacks are becoming and the meaningless platitudes from our leaders in their aftermath. Yesterday, Boris Johnson said, "We must all remain vigilant and Britain will never be cowed by terrorism." Well, yes, we will all remain vigilant, and this country, thankfully, is stacked full of very brave, very courageous, very proud individuals who will refuse to live their lives in fear. But Boris Johnson drives around in an armour-plated car flanked by police officers on motorbikes, whilst it's Liverpudlian taxi drivers on the front line of this thing. It's people enjoying a pint in Borough Market. It's the people trying to get to work on the tube. It's the children attending an Ariana Grande concert who are on the front line of this. Now, it's important to say that MI5 revealed they thwarted 31 late-stage terror attacks in the UK in the last 4 years, and that there can be no doubt that they're working flat out to keep us safe, and that there are probably countless other situations that they take care of that we'll never know about, and we should be immensely grateful for their work. It's also nigh on impossible to thwart every single lunatic who decides that they want to commit a terror attack. It just takes some nutter in their bedroom to see one thing online, pull a kitchen knife out of their drawer, and before you know it, we've got another attack on our hands. We all understand that. We all accept that there is simply an inherent risk out there that we all just have to deal with. But it feels like it's our political leaders who are too complacent on terror in general, and we're not helping ourselves, or rather, they're not helping us. Cutting police numbers and then making a big song and dance about replacing the officers they slashed isn't helping us. Having a justice system that allows a man who is known to have radicalised at least 70 other terrorists to serve just a few years in prison before not just being back out on the streets, but allowed to continue hate preaching, isn't helping us. I'm very worried about the situation taking place in the Channel. I want to really stress that if I was from various countries in the Middle East or Africa or wherever, and I had no hope whatsoever of a good life, I undoubtedly would try to make my way to a better, probably European country. So we can't begrudge people for wanting a better life for their family. We should also acknowledge that, as yet, there's not been a single instance that I'm aware of anyone who has come across the Channel committing a terror attack in this country. But I am deeply concerned that it has the potential to happen. And that's a perfectly logical concern, because by definition, if we don't know who thousands of these people are, it can pose a risk to national security. But what I'm really worried about is what will happen if one of them does commit a terror attack. I fear that we're sitting on a powder keg as a nation at the moment, and I think there'll be huge public backlash on the streets if that happens. That would show the very worst of Britain. It would show rage, and it would just be horrible. And I just hope that our government doesn't continue to sleepwalk into a situation that could allow that to happen. But there's another element to this as well, where I really do not think we're helping ourselves. We're dealing with a warped ideology here, radical Islam more often than not, and we need to eliminate it root and branch. And at the moment, I think that our education system helps to promote a very negative view of Britain. It highlights all the wrongs this country has committed in the past. All too often, it paints us as a nation of violent imperialist slave traders with no moral compass. What impact does that have on children in this country? Well, it leads to the Union Jack being burnt outside a school in London, which actually happened. Again, we're not helping ourselves. We hold up our side of the bargain as the public. We keep calm, we carry on, we get back on the tube a couple of days after 7/7, we go back to Borough Market. I think it's time that the government held up their end of the bargain and do more to keep us safe. Yes, look, I think it's we're potentially sleepwalking into a very dangerous situation here, and like I said, you know, I don't want to... It's a fine line, isn't it, between expressing your genuine concerns then sounding a bit like you're trying to whip up fear. And I'm not trying to whip up fear at all, far from it. But, look, I can't help but feel as though terror attacks have become too normalised in this country at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's right to say... What do you mean when you say normalised? Because they are still, thankfully, incredibly rare in this country.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there is a normalisation necessarily of terror attacks.
I think the public outrage is lesser. And I also think just the things like our politicians now, like Boris Johnson's statement yesterday, he was just wheeling out all the old classics, wasn't he? You know, right, we need to remain vigilant and you know, thoughts and prayers. And it's like, well, actually, hang on a minute. Thoughts and prayers are one thing, but actions are another thing. And I'm just concerned that they've almost lost their edge a little bit now sometimes with these terror attacks. It's like, oh, is there another one? As opposed to it being, you know...
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's right to blame schools. I mean, we all go through the national education system. We don't all come out hating Britain and wanting to plot a terrorist attack. No. Clearly, people often get radicalised online. And, you know, our PREVENT programme, the de-radicalisation programme in this country, is inadequate. And policing the internet, policing the content that is on the internet is pretty impossible unless you were to massively dedicate, you know, all efforts and resources to sort of censoring particular material. But as we had Dr. Rakib Ehsan on yesterday. He's very good at all this. He's from the Henry Jackson Society, and he speaks a lot about the fact that there's communities in this country which are communities sort of unto themselves. They're not integrated into the wider community. These things are allowed or facilitated to happen, to fester, because these communities are very detached from the broader sort of British society. And again, I think that's where a lot of these problems come from, because these things are not recognised because they're in silos.
Yeah. And I don't think we help ourselves. It's wrong to blame the entire education system. It's not what I'm doing. I think it's the idea that actually, I think there's a promotion of some of the negative elements of Britain's past, and I think what that can lead to in some cases is the idea that we haven't got a culture worth protecting, or that our values are wrong, or that we're, you know, not a particularly great country, or this, that, and the other. And if that is the case, and I think people are more inclined to hate it, or people are more inclined to feel ostracised from it, or want to change it, or think that actually, frankly, you know, things don't matter over here. And that, for me, is a very dangerous situation to end up in.
Yes, well, let us know what you think. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Are our politicians doing enough to protect us? Do you think they're complacent when it comes to terrorist attacks? Let us know. Now, GB News understands the terrorist bomber we've been speaking about were killed when his device exploded in the back of a Liverpool taxi was not known to the security services. Ahmad al-Swalmeen died when his device detonated in the vehicle as it pulled up to the front of Liverpool's Women's Hospital on Sunday morning, and we showed you that footage yesterday.
We did indeed. Now, an asylum seeker from the Middle East who had an original application to stay in the country was rejected in 2014. Al-Swalmeen rented a flat about a mile from the hospital in recent weeks. Now, that property on Rutland Avenue, which is where he's believed to have assembled his bomb, remains sealed off this morning. The 4 men arrested on Sunday and into Monday have now been released.
Yes, well, GB News' home and security editor Mark White joins us now from Liverpool. Mark, just talk us through the latest developments in this tragic incident.
Well, I suppose the most significant line to have emerged overnight is the 4 men who were arrested, young men, all under 30, who were arrested in the connection with the terrorist attack outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital have now all been released. That's not a surprise, because what often happens is once they identify who an attacker is, then they start trying to determine key facts like where did they live, who did they associate with, who are their family members. So you get people that are friends, associates, family, relatives of the individual being taken into police custody in question, because the police have to determine whether they were a part of the plot, may pose some risk themselves. But often the vast majority of these people are then arrested and are then released, I should say, in the preceding hours. But I wanted to address a couple of points in Patrick's monologue, because it was a good monologue, Patrick, and you made some very interesting and pertinent points on this issue of the threat that is faced by asylum seekers. I think that is a very real concern for the police and security services going forward. And I say this for a number of reasons. Now, this individual, this bomber whose device detonated, thankfully not fully, and before he could get into that hospital, was, we know, an asylum seeker. In terms of other incidents that have taken place involving asylum seekers, well, you'll all remember the Parsons Green bombing in September of 2017. Now, that man, Ahmed Hassan, a young man, was an Iraqi asylum seeker who'd had his asylum bid turned down. He was facing deportation again when he then decided to detonate a bomb, a bit like Sunday. Thankfully, it made up of the same explosive substance, didn't fully detonate, but still injured 30 people in that District Line tube train. The other issue which is pertinent to this is the real concerns that authorities have about asylum seekers who throw away, and this is very common for those crossing via the channel or on the backs of lorries for that matter, their identity documents, so their passports, driving licences, other documents that can identify an individual and allow the authorities to fully check on their background. It's often also difficult to check on someone's background if they come from a war-torn region, understandably. So it's often not that easy for the authorities to be able to fully delve into someone's background and potential previous history of extremism and offending behaviour. And it's very pertinent because of what's happening now on the border with Belarus and Poland, Lithuania and Poland. The authorities in Lithuania have said that in recent weeks some 4,000 people have come across their borders seeking asylum. 24, more than 24 of those 4,000 people who've crossed the border, they have managed to carry out some kind of background checks on and have found that they have been members of and associated with extremist groups out of the Middle East, so involved in the likes of fighting in Syria. That is of great concern to them, obviously. These people will be deported from their soil again. But the authorities here in this country, Patrick and Mercy, share that same concern because it's not as easy to get in and delve into the background of these individuals because they're throwing away their documents, because we have a history, thankfully rare, but still there is a pattern of some individuals who've come from these war-torn areas, perhaps damaged by the experiences that they've lived through these war-torn areas, perhaps members of extremist groups and had taken part in fighting. For instance, one other to mention, of course, Salman Abedi, who set off that bomb in Manchester, at the Manchester Arena, and killed all of these innocent young girls mainly who'd been attending that concert. They too, he too I should say, had been involved in fighting out in Libya. So there are concerns, very pertinent concerns, worth raising, Patrick.
And expertly done as always, whizzing us through a very complex and broad issue. Thank you very much, Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor. We'll be returning to him throughout the show as developments continue in that particular case. But now let's talk to Kevin Hurley, who's former head of counter-terrorism with the City of London Police, who returned from Afghanistan earlier this year, where he was advisor for the UN on security and counter-insurgency. Thank you very much for joining us. There's one area that's actually, people are getting in touch with me right now before my eyes in our emails here. and it's in relation to this particular case that's taken place in Liverpool. This chap was an asylum seeker. He was a failed asylum seeker, essentially. And a lot of people are asking, when somebody doesn't obtain asylum in this country, why don't we deport them straight away? Doesn't that heighten a risk, potentially, if you leave people here who know they've been rejected? It can foster anger, can't it?
Well, I mean, first of all, there are legal processes that people are entitled to go through. That's how it operates in this country. They can appeal their asylum applications being rejected, which can take a long time. And if we look at where we are with the court system post-COVID, the court system are completely overwhelmed. So cases are taking years to get to the court. That's the first point. But secondly, there just simply are not the resources amongst the border force, Home Office officials, to keep tabs on asylum seekers, know where they are and know what they're doing. We are in a very, very difficult position in this country to manage this problem. I'm telling you what everyone knows anyway. But there are probably 20,000 people who are a concern to the security forces and probably a couple of thousand who are a real concern. And it's then a balancing act for the security forces of who they are going to pay special attention to. So I'm afraid what's just happened, this kind of lone wolf nutter, frankly, with a perverted view of the world, is something that is almost impossible to stop. The police and MI5 do remarkably well. You know, you'll remember they stopped that guy last year in Streatham within seconds of him running amok. But there are going to be people that get through, just like this dreadful case up in Manchester.
And so, of course, as you mentioned, this guy appears to have been a lone wolf, although 3 other people have been arrested under the Terrorism Act in connection. Is this something we kind of have to expect then, that there will be lone wolves? I mean, what can the police do and the security services do in terms of the security threats that they can actually stop? Because it seems to me that this kind of threat, we just have to be, we have to accept that it's going to happen eventually.
Well, to be honest, you are right. You know, the numbers and the challenges of our society in keeping tabs on everyone are far greater than the resources available to the police and to the security services, and they are small numbers. You know, MI5, 2,500, 3,000 people, counter-terrorist officers, just a few thousand. When you then put that against the number of potential problems, people who are concerned, it is impossible to keep tabs on them. So you are, in fact, correct. This is just going to be part of life for us, that you will get people, whether they are Islamist extremists or right-wing extremists, who are not going to be on the radar, or will be, but there's not the resources to deal with them. And we're going to end up with this, because in this country, we do not arrest people or deport them without due process. That's why we're a democracy. So we are stuck with this, I'm afraid. So the only issues are, how can we be more proactive and get upstream of this? The government, the police and security services have their Prevent programme, and they call it Channel, where they try and spot people who are a problem and try and introduce them to people to counsel them that perhaps this is not the best way to go forward. That's to put it nicely. But of course, it's very difficult to get people to do that. The guy who ran amok on London Bridge a couple of years ago and had to be stopped by members of the public, ex-prisoners, and then shot by the police, he convinced everyone he wasn't a threat. You know, it's a very, very difficult job, and we are fortunate, I would say this, wouldn't I, but we are fortunate that the security services and the police do so well in monitoring.
I just want to cut in quickly because we're a bit pressed for time. I just want to have one more with you, if that's all right. And you mentioned the word channel there. Let's talk about the actual channel now. And I think my concern is that we're sitting on a bit of a powder keg at the moment, and with these people coming in, you know, record numbers almost weekly, that actually would only take one of those individuals to commit an attack in this country that will cost lives. And I worry about the social ramifications of that in this nation. How concerned are you about that?
Very. I mean, you are right to worry about that. Years ago, when I was the elected Police and Crime Commissioner for Surrey, I infiltrated the Calais jungle camp, if you remember. And it was a really frightening place because there was one common factor. 95% of all the people there were young males, mainly of Middle Eastern background or North African background. That is to say, they've been brought up in the Muslim faith. There's nothing wrong with being part of the Muslim faith, but who is to say who amongst them have not moved to the extreme edge of Islamism, or who is coming across the borders right now in these boats is not actually a returning fighter from Syria, Iraq, or even Afghanistan, all of whom will have skills in killing people. So you are correct, we are sitting on a real worrying issue, and the powder keg, I think, is the potential pushback that could end up us fracturing our society with chunks of society turning against each other.
I agree.
As a result of it. You are correct.
I agree. Yes.
Well, Kevin Hurley, thank you so much for that really insightful interview, former head of counter-terrorism in the City of London. Really interesting stuff there.
It's a massive concern what's happening at the moment, but keep those emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We will go to them shortly. There's some absolutely brilliant ones in there, so I want to get them expressed on national television, of course. But after the break, England confirmed their qualification to the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar last night with a 10-0 drubbing of the San Marino Minnows. But with reports of Qatari migrant workers being trapped, injured, exploited, we'll be asking whether or not we should actually boycott the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. There's lots of virtue signalling in sport. Maybe it's time we put our money where our mouth is. But first, the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good morning. A duller day today across Scotland and Northern Ireland, with a bit of rain for a time as well, and blustery. Meanwhile, for most of England and Wales, a largely dry day again, if fairly cloudy. But there is some fog around this morning, quite thick in places as well, so just bear that in mind for the morning commute. This weather system moving into the northwest, though, will bring the rain. Notice the isobars squeezing together as well. So it's been a windy night across the northwest, and it's turning wetter on the west coast of Scotland as well. Some mist and fog, particularly across parts of East Anglia and southern England, but that is steadily going to clear. It will stay predominantly cloudy for England and Wales, but the vast majority will also stay dry. Spell of rain through the middle of the day for Northern Ireland, turning drier through the afternoon. At the same time, a band of really squally showers will pep up in the far northwest. Another pretty mild day, especially in the south. A bit of brightness, could see temperatures climbing easily into the teens. A windy evening then, with further showers coming into western Scotland, turning to snow over the tops of the hills. A bit of patchy rain for northern England and Wales, but again, that kind of fizzles out as it slips further south. And it will be something of a colder night. Temperatures more widely, certainly across the far north, down to single figures, but enough of a breeze to stop temperatures falling too far. On to the details for Wednesday, and a brighter day for the south. A bit more sunshine likely here and some blue sky as well. There will be showers coming at times for northwest England, North Wales and certainly western Scotland. The odd one for Northern Ireland, but many southern and eastern parts having a dry, fine day on Wednesday. It will be breezy, and that breeze will bring a chillier day. Temperatures, though, still around about average for the time of year, 10 to 11 degrees Celsius. Some rain trickling into Northern Ireland late on, and that will be around across western Scotland on Thursday, but a lot of dry weather through the rest of the week and into the weekend. Staying mild as well, but signs of things turning colder through the weekend.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Hello, I am Simon Pusey. Here are the latest news headlines. NHS organisations have been asked to review their security arrangements after the Liverpool terrorist attack. The 4 men arrested in relation to the taxi explosion have now all been released from police custody. The bombing suspect who died in Sunday's car blast has been named as 32-year-old Emad al-Swealim. The driver, David Perry, escaped with minor injuries. The terrorism threat level in the UK has been increased to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. Azim Rafiq says Yorkshire County Cricket Club labelled him a troublemaker as soon as he brought the behaviour of senior players to the attention of management. He's currently appearing before MPs to discuss allegations of institutional racism at the club. An investigation by Yorkshire concluded Mr Rafiq was a victim of racial harassment and bullying, but nobody was disciplined. The club's former chairman, Roger Hutton, who quit in the aftermath of the row, will also give evidence to the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee. NHS leaders are calling for social care staff to be given cash bonuses to stop them from leaving for other jobs in the winter. They want the government to offer £500 incentives so they don't take Christmas work in hospitality, supermarkets or firms like Amazon. The sector already has more than 100,000 vaccines. And an original Star Wars poster is among hundreds of iconic film memorabilia going under the hammer. Fans across the world will battle it out to bid for items worth more than £250,000 during a 2-day auction. The Empire Strikes Back concept movie poster by Josh Kirby is expected to sell for up to £8,000. Well, I'll have more on today's main stories for you at the top of the hour. Now back to The Point with Mercy and Patrick.
Morning everyone. Now, England confirmed their qualification to the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar last night with a 10-0 drubbing in San Marino. This is a World Cup that's raising eyebrows, but not for the right reasons. Fans in Germany, Denmark, Norway and the Netherlands have all raised concerns about the ethics of the tournament, with some even calling for a boycott.
Yes, Amnesty International are calling Qatar the World Cup of shame after widespread reports of abhorrent conditions for migrant workers. The Times newspaper even reports some workers building stadiums have returned home with kidney diseases so severe that they required either transplants or dialysis, and this is due to the poor working conditions. Now, of course, it's every footballer's dream to play in the World Cup, and it's something fans want to see, but can we just turn a blind eye to Qatari human rights abuses?
Well, joining us now is our sports editor, Mike Boville, who's seen the stadium construction in Qatar firsthand, has also been to 4 World Cups, and former Switzerland and Tottenham defender Ramon Vega as well, who played at Euro 96. Well, thank you very much. Just thought I'd talk to both of you about this, I suppose, really. But start with you, Ramon, as you're on the screen there. Do footballers actually care about things like the human rights abuses and stuff like that? Because actually, are you just very blinkered? You just want to go and play football? I mean, the ones that are taking place in Qatar are pretty extreme, aren't they?
Well, first of all, good morning from Budapest to everybody. Listen, I'm not a pro or contra person, and to the question as players care about, yes, of course. First of all, the World Cup is one of the biggest tournaments on the planet. For a player to be in play, it's an honor to present your country there, and so forth. It's pretty much, we're talking about football here, first of all, number one. Number two, what we're talking about here in terms of human rights, let's say that as well. Human rights are everywhere in the world, including where we are, everybody standing. So go against a country who actually hosts the World Cup, in this case, it's a very unfair way to do it, because you're actually punishing also the fans in here on doing this as well. Now, of course, human rights has to be addressed everywhere. But I personally, and I was not paid by FIFA, I was not paid by any organization I include in Qatar. I myself went down to Qatar to have a look at the infrastructure. I have to praise such a small country to build that in such a small time, such unbelievable infrastructure.
Yeah,
let's not forget, all the construction companies are not Qataris, all from outside from Qatar. So we need to question also that. For that point of view, it goes much deeper than this.
But do you not think that sounds like you're trying to brush it under the carpet? Because you talk about punishing the fans there, but what about the people who've suffered actually building these stadiums? There's well-documented accounts of people who, the doctors have looked at them and said these people are suffering from conditions that require urgent medical treatment because of the poor working conditions. So there are other people being punished quite severely, aside from the fans.
6,500 migrant workers have died in Qatar since the World Cup was awarded there, Ramon. That's a lot.
Well, listen, of course we have to address this, but let's also not forget, do we have no human rights even in the UK with such a horrendous, potentially working space? And that's in the UK or other countries as well, or in the US. So even addressing to such an extremity just because they're hosting the World Cup, and in this case, I will have to say, even the current FIFA has a huge responsibility in addressing this, and they're not doing as much. I praise the Qataris, first of all, even have the courage to host such a big event and doing such a great job. But as I say again, you could not punish the fans and the supporters, because ultimately this is a part for the supporters and not for the ball has to go around the globe with the World Cup, and it's important.
Well, thank you. Just stay with us for a second. We're just going to go to our sports editor, Mike Boville. Mike, the reality is his view is not unique. It's reflected by a lot of footballers. They're saying, yes, we acknowledge that there are some human rights issues in Qatar, but ultimately the World Cup is for putting on a show, putting on this great footballing, show, and that's what we need to concentrate on.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's not a unique view. You only have to look at David Beckham, who has decided to be part of the Qatar 2022 team, despite the fact that he was very prominently the face of England's bid for the 2018 World Cup, which failed at the same time.
He's done a lot of work for UNICEF as well.
And has done a lot of work for UNICEF. And let's not mention the conflict of interest in what he's previously done in the gay community as well, and the fact that being gay is still illegal in Qatar, which should raise a few alarm bells. The real issue here is not with just Qatar, although clearly there is an issue. It's not just with FIFA, who allowed them to be awarded the World Cup. It's not just with the people who voted for them. And half of the FIFA committee, which voted in Qatar to become host of the 2022 World Cup, are now currently either in prison, have been convicted, have been fined, have been suspended or banned for life on corruption charges. But actually, football as a whole, has to take responsibility. It's a cesspit. It's a cesspit full of dirty money, and anyone who thinks otherwise is completely wrong. From the very, very top, at the heart of FIFA, and we saw just earlier this month Sepp Blatter, the former president of FIFA, being charged with corruption over a £1.35 million payment he made to the former head of UEFA, Michel Platini. The Premier League, you have clubs owned by oil states, Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia, in respectively Manchester City and Newcastle United now as well. And this trickles down all the way. So you're not going to get footballers saying, no, it's a terrible idea, let's not go to Qatar, because they've all benefited.
Yeah, I just find it amazing that we have so much virtue signalling taking place before every single game in this country now. We're taking the knee, we've got the Rainbow Laces campaign, etc. And then we've got a country here where we're going to go and watch a World Cup played in stadiums built by slaves where it's illegal to be gay. But I just want to bring Ramon back in now, if that's all right. Thank you very much. Look, I do absolutely take your point. We are not a perfect country. There are human rights abuses taking place here. I'm not trying to brush those under the carpet. But what I am saying is we're going to have a tournament now played in a country where you can be executed if you are gay. And you mentioned punishing the fans by not having this tournament. I do take that, but it might be the Qataris who punish the fans. My friend and his boyfriend, when they land off the plane in Qatar, they're going to have to just stop being gay, are they, for a few weeks? What about women? Women don't have any rights over there. What about female fans? You know, it's surely you can't be condoning having a tournament in this kind of country. Sorry, say that again. Yeah, no, we lost you for a second there.
I want to ask you a question. Do you yourself went ever once to Qatar? You went down there to have a look, how it looks like, what it is?
I've not personally been to Qatar because I've had a look at all the human rights abuses.
Well, this is what I'm saying. It's important to criticise a country when you only can actually yourself look into it, how it actually has been handled on the ground. Having just coming on the internet and look what is actually going on from all the media outfit, I've
not been to North Korea either, but I get the impression that's pretty dicey.
By the way, like the gentleman was saying, I'm not a player. I get paid by Qatar, number one. I paid my own ticket, my own hotel down there. I was not invited by anybody down there, on myself. This is what being neutral about it is. And I can actually criticise myself, the country or not. And I'm not the person who criticises the country. I only say what I can improve or not, including everywhere in the world. If the World Cup was not going to UK or the US, I think we would be not talking today about Qatar, to be honest with you. Because we're not talking about anything within the bribery scenario. FIFA was a disaster until now. That's one of the biggest responsibilities. And football is for the fact, number one, you're not watching the football like the Saudis coming in, etc. It's always good to have money in the football industry. Now, the morality and ethical point of it is a huge question. Even countries were selling arms and dealing with this country, including the UK.
Well, that's right. Okay, let me just ask you. Let me just ask you this then. How bad would it have to be for you to boycott a World Cup? What would a country have to be involved in for you to say, actually, it's crossed a moral red line here, I won't support these games?
Well, the only one you can do is the war. Only a war can be a boycott, because that's the worst thing you can have on earth to have is a war. But in picking, in choosing, in pointing fingers, when we're looking around the globe, how much human rights worse what we're looking in down there, because a big tournament addresses a small country, and they're doing a fantastic job in that case, and they're very brave to do it. And they're representing part of the Arab world and Islamic world, but as well, because they have also the rights to have some big tournament. And I'm a pro person who the ball goes around the globe. Otherwise, we would be not concentrating just in Europe and nowhere else, and the ball will not go around. And it's important to address everybody else, every single country who voted. We took into over 111 nations have voted with that. So everybody's responsible, including the UK, what they're actually voting in the future.
OK. Well, Roman, thank you very much. It's an interesting discussion. I'm very glad that you actually came on and had it, because it's not a view, let's be honest, that a lot of people are willing to kind of put across. So, Roman Vega there, who played at Euro 96. I think I've just got time quickly. Obviously, another one with Mike, have we? Yes, well, we're doing it. Look, some people are saying in the inbox here, you know, there's a hypocrisy here with players taking the knee, the rainbow laces stuff, and then, you know, not necessarily speaking out when it comes to Qatar. Do you think that it should now be a bit of a choice, one or the other? We can either virtue signal or we can go and play football in Qatar.
That's a really good question. It's basically far too late.
Yeah.
We're far too down the line. We're far too in the quagmire for any prospect of this World Cup not taking place. The time was actually before the vote 11 years ago, when there should have been a stand against even a country like Qatar, with the record that they had in saying no to this. We are absolutely done. But you see the reliance on football of betting money. We're seeing the way that oil states have come in and taken over, and other sovereign wealth funds. You know, we are well past that point now, I'm afraid.
Mike, thank you so much. It was a cracking discussion, that. It was not quite a head-to-head, it's more of just a discussion in the round, really, and it was fascinating to have it. Mike Bovell there, of course, our sports editor, our esteemed sports editor.
Yes, and let's take you to a short break, and then we'll be back very shortly.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage. I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning. You're watching To The Point here on GB News. We've been speaking about lots of issues this morning. We spoke about that Liverpool terror incident. We've also been talking over the last 10 or so minutes about Qatar and the World Cup taking place there, and whether footballers in England should actually be boycotting the games due to the human rights abuses going on there in Qatar. And you've been keeping your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we can go to those now.
Yes, just in relation to the terror attack, I basically said I think this government's being a bit complacent about terror in this country. My thoughts exactly, Patrick. It's all right for the Prime Minister. I'm from Liverpool and I'm frightened. We don't know who these people are. And that's from Edwina. And I think, you know, it's a shame, isn't it, that clearly a lot of people are frightened at the moment. A lot of you also saying that we are sleepwalking towards a potential disaster with the amount of people we're letting in across the channel, and yeah, there's quite a lot of this going about, it's fair to say. And also another one here from Dave mentioning that the terrorist asylum process was rejected and he was still allowed to stay in this country. We do have a legal process, obviously, and that's fair enough. That's the rule of law that we live by. But there are certain discussions to be had, I think, about whether or not we need to speed that up when it comes to asylum claims, because it could pose a risk. You end up with someone who's been rejected, who's very angry about the whole thing, and here we are, you know.
Yes, indeed. Well, keep your views coming in, GB Views at gbnews.uk, especially on that issue of Qatar.
Yes.
Do you think we should be boycotting Qatar? Do we have?
We have actually. The Qatar should never have been awarded the World Cup. The rampant human rights abuses are an absolute disgrace, and that is from Mike.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Now, moving on to another issue. Detectives investigating the disappearance of a 14-year-old girl say they have received significant intelligence after she went missing in the Kettering area of Northamptonshire. Over 20 years ago, Sarah Benford was last seen on the April the 6th, 2000, before a murder probe was launched 3 years later.
Well, a number of suspects have been arrested since the disappearance, but nobody has yet been charged. Northamptonshire Police say specialist search teams and forensic archaeologists will begin excavating and urge anyone with new information to contact them on 101, quoting incident number 359.
Yes, well, Emma Kenny is a psychologist, presenter, commentator and host of a true crime podcast who is familiar with this case, and she joins us now. Thank you for joining us, Emma. I'm actually from Northamptonshire, and I don't recall this case. I think I would have been 10 years old at the time, but I assume it would have been massively significant. So how significant is this particular development?
Well, I mean, it's significant because the police obviously kept the case open and have returned to it. And I know that her mother and grandmother early on were incredibly active in trying to get people to come forward with information. But this is going to be a huge opportunity for them to obviously find hopefully a body if that's the case. You know, if it's an unfortunate situation to be in, the fact that you might be returning a body, the point is once you've got a body, there is some hope potentially of finding out who actually went ahead and murdered that child. That being said, again, even though they've taken this very, very seriously, there have been things before that have been brought up. As you noted, people have been arrested, questioned and released. So it's not something that's going to absolutely be certain. I would say that the fact that the police have gone in and are really taking this 70-metre square area seriously sounds like the information and intelligence that they've been given must be very, very good intelligence. And I would imagine that it's bated breath, the whole family and people who knew Sarah are waiting to find out whether this is indeed the information that is going to hopefully bring her home. Even though it's a tragedy, at least they'll have some closure to that situation.
I'd like to ask you a bit from a psychological perspective about the kind of individual who may have committed a crime like this. Are there any kind of specific psychological traits that these people tend to have?
I mean, first of all, it's important to know that Sarah's life was a difficult life, and there's been leaps and bounds made both in the police and social services since this occurred because there were massive failures in this situation. This was a child who was in care. That's the most vulnerable child that you can imagine. She wasn't given the support that she was meant to receive. Welford House, the place that she was staying, didn't take it that seriously when she was running away. The police themselves didn't actually pick her up when she was desperately begging to be picked up and returned to the care home. They said that they weren't there as a taxi service. They're massive failures. We wouldn't do that these days because of Rotherham, etc. But when it comes down to the kind of perpetrator, well, I mean, essentially she was involved in quite a subculture, as a lot of 14-year-olds are when they're struggling and vulnerable. So there were drugs around, there were unsavoury characters around. Potentially it was something that occurred to her when she was hanging out with a group and something went horribly wrong on one level. The alternative is, chances are, if you were a predator, the type of psychology that, let's take a classic psychopathic predator, they are going to see vulnerability, sniff it out and exploit it. So it could be somebody just saw a young girl who was vulnerable, who was very easy to coerce into a situation where she complied with them, and then she ended up being brutally murdered. That could be something as well that they look at. So it could be an incidence of a violent situation occurring and spiraling out of control with a group of people who were high on drugs, or it could be something even more sinister than that regarding somebody who's predatorily going around trying to procure individual victims. And we'll know that when they actually find the body and when forensics get an opportunity to explore whether there is any way of finding the evidence that would lead to the perpetrator. But it's hard to differentiate what kind of a perpetrator it would be at this moment in time.
Yeah, and this is the worst sort of possible kind of crime. Obviously, child murder, in my eyes anyway, is the worst possible kind of crime. I mean, luckily, it's a very rare occurrence today, but has the police moved on from, we're talking 2006, obviously, in terms of how they approach these matters? You spoke a bit there about how social services might interact with a child that's gone missing now because of cases like Rotherham. But are the police now better at and quicker at identifying perhaps suspects and looking for children when things like this do happen in 2021?
I mean, I guess there's two levels. On one level, you've got the social services element, which is it was failed terribly back in the day. I mean, even when I was working 20 years ago with young people who were in care, the reality was that they were treated less so than they should have been compared to the average child who was living at home, for example. So they were seen as a nuisance at times, problematic, deserving of certain outcomes, which is completely reprehensible. I think we've done a lot of work. It still needs to occur. There are certainly still some issues that you see within those kind of situations and circumstances. Children in care should be given a lot more opportunity, I think, and some of the things that happens to those individuals in the long term is still something that we need to learn from. However, when it comes down to the police, yeah, the police definitely are making leaps and bounds in trying to take these kind of things seriously. But I would note that you have cases even in the past 2 years where families have reported daughters missing and they've been found dead 36 hours later with no intervention by the police whatsoever. In fact, family members found the bodies of the two individuals I've just talked about there. So we're still learning. The one thing I'd say about the police is, if you're talking about a psychopathic random killer, there is very little they can do to legislate creating a situation where they could prevent that. However, when it comes down to investigating and making sure that perpetrators are brought to justice after crimes, and think about the fact that we've had 3 women in the past few years just randomly murdered by strangers in the UK, that's something I think that have improved on massively. And even though we can criticise the police a great deal in the UK, when you compare it to other countries, the States and the UK are fantastic services. They really are. They go out of their way to ensure that people are brought to justice, and we have very good rates in that respect.
Emma, thank you very, very much. Emma Kennedy there, of course, the producer of the True Crime podcast, as well as being a psychologist and criminal expert as well.
Yes, well, keep all your thoughts coming into us, GB Views at gbnews.uk, and we'll be back with more of today's top stories and plenty of your views after a short break. But here's the weather first.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Another largely cloudy day out there. A bit of brightness here and there, but most places staying fairly dull. There's some wet weather crossing Scotland. Also pretty windy here as well. The isobars squeezing together close to this little area of low pressure. Further south, high pressure is nearby. There's a week-old weather front. This one, though, is a little more lively, and it is bringing rain, not just to Scotland, actually, but for a time we're going to see a spell of rain crossing Northern Ireland, but it should peter out through the afternoon. Meanwhile, across Scotland, the rain will continue across western areas. The east may not see much of that rain until late on, but it is very blustery as well. Further south, the winds are light. That old weather front may be providing a bit of drizzle here and there, but generally dry, but fairly dull, but mild, with temperatures again climbing into the teens. Through this evening, we'll see a bit of that rain just trickling into northern England, maybe across parts of Wales before it fizzles out. Lots of showers then coming into Scotland, a few for Northern Ireland, staying blustery here as well. A bit of snow on the tops of the mountains across Scotland. But elsewhere, the skies tend to clear and it turns a bit chilly. Temperatures well down into single figures. But it does make for a brighter day tomorrow, certainly for most of England and Wales. A few showers, certainly early on over northwest England, and showers will keep going through the day across western Scotland. A few for Northern Ireland as well, but many areas here will be dry, and certainly across much of the southern half of the UK, it's a dry, fine day with decent spells of sunshine, a bit of a breeze and a slightly cooler feel, but still these temperatures are pretty close to average for the time of year. Through Wednesday evening, we'll start to see a bit more cloud spilling into Northern Ireland, turning a little bit damp and drizzly, and that rain will push into western Scotland, where it will linger through much of the rest of this week, through Thursday and Friday as well. But elsewhere, staying largely dry through the rest of this week. Lots of cloud around, and again, it's going to turn milder, but perhaps things turning colder through the weekend.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Yes, well, good morning. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Mercy Maroki. We are here all the way through until midday with a show full of all those big stories and those big discussion topics as well.
Yes, so make sure you get in touch with your views. As usual, GB Views at gbnews.uk. We'll get to those very shortly, but first, it's time for the latest news.
Hello, I'm Simon Pusey and this is your news at 11 o'clock. The former Yorkshire county cricketer Azeem Rafiq says racism in cricket is worse than in society. He's appearing before MPs to discuss allegations of institutional racism at the Yorkshire County Cricket Club. An investigation by Yorkshire concluded Mr Rafiq was a victim of racial harassment and bullying, but nobody was disciplined. Mr Rafiq told the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee that abuse in the club went unchecked.
He went past a couple of men with beard and it was like, oh, is that your dad? If we go past a corner shop, or does your uncle own this? Everyone saw it. But because the institution and the environment, it becomes such a norm in there that I don't think anyone thought there was anything wrong with it. And that's probably why some people don't even remember it.
NHS organisations have been asked to review their security arrangements after the Liverpool terrorist attack. The 4 men arrested in relation to the taxi explosion have now been released from police custody. The bombing suspect who died in Sunday's blast has been named as 32-year-old Emad al-Sway al-Minan. The driver, David Perry, survived the incident and has been discharged from hospital. The terrorism threat level in the UK has also been increased to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. Minister for Security and Borders, Damien Hines, told GB News people should be as vigilant as possible.
If you see something that doesn't look right, something that makes you suspicious about something, just to go that extra mentally, go that extra distance to say, yeah, I should report that. And if it turns out to not be significant, then nothing's been lost.
NHS leaders are calling for social care staff to be given cash bonuses to stop them leaving for other jobs in the winter. They want the government to offer £500 incentives so they don't take Christmas work in hospitality, supermarkets or firms like Amazon. Those working in care homes must now be double vaccinated. The sector already has more than 100,000 vaccines. An attempt to scrap the controversial standards reforms that sparked Westminster's sleaze row has been blocked by a Conservative MP. Last night's Commons motion endorsed the standards report, which concluded Owen Paterson had broken lobbying rules, leaving the standards system intact. But Tory MP Christopher Chope objected.
We now come to a motion relating to the Committee on Standards, and I call the Minister to move formally. Object. Objection taken.
And a debate on vote on standards is on today's Commons agenda. Former Labour MP Stephen Pound told GB News that sleaze is endemic.
And there are some people who are still trying to justify with this most sort of egregious nonsense, this risible theory that somehow, having being a spokesperson for a hedge fund actually adds lustre to the cluster, actually makes you somehow a better MP. Absolute nonsense.
The Prime Minister's father has been accused of inappropriately touching a Tory MP and a journalist. Caroline Noakes MP said Stanley Johnson smacked her on the backside in 2003 and Alva Ray claimed he groped her into 2019. Mr Johnson declined to comment but says he has no recollection of Caroline Noakes at all. The majority of school staff, parents and students believe GCSEs need to be reformed. A poll by the Headmasters and Headmistresses Conference found that more than half say GCSEs require serious reform and 40% believe they need some adjustment. It reported significant concern that both the curriculum and assessment are falling short in serving the needs of young people. A group of Insulate Britain activists could be jailed for allegedly breaching court injunctions. The High Court has so far issued 5 injunctions banning road blocking protests on the M25, around Dover Port and on major London roads. Those in breach could face a maximum penalty of 2 years in prison or an unlimited fine. 9 people are appearing at the High Court this morning. Insulate Britain says it intends to continue with the protests until the government agrees to insulate homes. Harry Kane scored 4 times as England thrashed San Marino 10-0 to secure World Cup qualification. That means the Tottenham striker goes level with Gary Lineker on 48 England goals. Only Sir Bobby Charlton and Wayne Rooney are ahead of him on the all-time scorers list. Well, that's it from me for now. I'll be back with the latest headlines in half an hour. Now let's return to the point.
Morning everyone, you're watching To The Point on GB News with Patrick Christie's and Mercy Muroki. We've got a big show for you, a big final hour with all those top topics, the biggest guests as well, and everything to get you going.
Yes, and here's what's on the menu. In the aftermath of Sunday's explosion, the country's terror threat has been raised to severe. GB News understands the terror bomber killed when his device exploded in the back of a Liverpool taxi was not known to security services. Our home and security editor, Mark White, will bring us the latest.
He will indeed. Now, thousands of overweight children are to be sent to NHS clinics under pilot schemes in a bid to tackle the obesity crisis. We'll have more on the UK fat camps.
Yes, and the Prime Minister is facing a backlash from MPs, mayors and the north of England, as it's expected the eastern leg of the HS2 between Birmingham and Leeds will be scrapped tomorrow. We'll bring you more on that failing project, I think it's fair to say.
Well, the expensive white elephant.
Very, very expensive.
Rip the face off the British countryside. But anyway, we'll have all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme. And you can get in touch with us, as usual, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But first, Mercy gives her views on the childhood obesity epidemic.
The NHS has announced that preschool children will be amongst the 1,000 severely obese youngsters a year to be treated in a new national network of 15 specialist weight loss clinics. The clinics will be open to obese children from aged 2 and will offer support from specialists such as dietitians, psychologists and social workers in a bid to slim down the shocking figure of 2.5 million overweight children in England. Now, these figures show something is going dramatically wrong in society. We're more medically advanced than ever before. Health advice is more accessible than ever before. We're throwing more money at the health and social care service than ever, and yet people seem to be getting more and more unhealthier. Our children are getting unhealthier. In fact, evidence shows younger generations are becoming obese at earlier ages and staying obese for longer. And the latest Public Health England data shows that the proportion of overweight 4- and 5-year-olds is at its highest ever at nearly 1 in 4 preschoolers. The proportion of children who are classed as severely obese is also at its highest in recent times. So, who is to blame for this epidemic of overweight kids? Well, whilst it might be convenient for many to blame everything on genetics these days, I'm afraid it's parents who have to take the lion's share of responsibility. Not all the blame, but certainly most of it. Poor diet and low levels of physical activity are the primary causes of being overweight, and nearly half of pregnant women attending their first appointment are also overweight themselves, something that is linked to childhood obesity. Look, I understand the cost of living is high and growing. I get that obesity is linked to poverty. In fact, the rate of obese preschoolers is twice as high in the most deprived areas than in the least deprived areas than in the most deprived. I also understand that putting money into tackling childhood obesity in the early stages can save the taxpayer money in the long run. But why is our solution to everything to throw more taxpayer money at it? Where's the role of personal responsibility these days? And in this case, parental responsibility. I hazard a guess that so many overweight children are overweight because their parents allow them to live a sedentary life in front of the PlayStation or the iPad, snacking on Whatsits and Kit Kats. Shifting the blame in society is clearly in vogue, but parents' choices surely are to blame for obese kids. Perhaps it's time for some parents, rather than the state, to take up more responsibility for looking after their children properly.
Yes, no,
I might need to go into hiding after that.
Well, what? Well, I mean, they're not going to run after you, are they, by definition? So, but no, I mean, I think, you know, I've got to claim an interest in this. I was always a relatively chubby child, but I was also very active. And you know, have you ever heard of the hyper-Mediterranean diet? I think it's, you know, lots of fish, lots of veg, lots of oil, etc., etc. So I operate off the opposite of that, which is just 7 cups of black coffee, 20 B&H Golds, and some succulent Thai food. But that's just a personal choice. But I also occasionally go for a jog, and I do think that actually, essentially, it's child abuse when you see these kids waddling down the street. You've got parents there with them, normally spilling out of their leggings, you know, and then you've got little fat Timmy next to them coming down. It's child abuse. You're raising a kid with high cholesterol.
It's obviously a very complicated issue, and I understand that what's thrown out there a lot is that, well, it's too expensive to eat healthier, which I don't actually agree with personally. We can have a debate about all of that, but I don't believe it's impossible for somebody on a low income to plan for a healthy diet. But, you know, when we're talking about severely obese children, we're talking about children who are, the definition of severely obese is you're heavier than 99% of people in your age and gender bracket. So you're literally the 1% of heaviest people.
They're the 1%.
For your, yes. And I just think for a child, to allow your child to get to that stage, your 2 or 3-year-old child, to the point where the state is having to intervene because your 3-year-old child is so severely obese that they're needing to see a dietitian and needing a social worker involved. I mean, you can't tell me that something has not gone tragically wrong there, and that often it's not to the parents. That's my view.
A very close friend of mine, their parents had to put locks on the sweet cupboards.
A close friend.
Very close personal friend of mine.
You couldn't possibly name
when they were younger. And another close personal friend of mine thought that bread was healthy, so whenever they ate a Kit Kat, they'd wrap it in bread and eat it. Yes, so, you know, maybe food education.
I was wondering whose Kit Kat sandwich that was actually in the
but no, I do think though that maybe some of this is down to education and lack of, you know, maybe there should be more adult education when it comes to things like food groups, etc., etc., etc.
But it's all out there. It is all out there.
Yeah,
it's more accessible than ever before. So people are actually actively making the choice to effectively be overweight.
Yes, well, I suppose so. So. I did once go to the doctors and they told me I had higher cholesterol than my dad, so that's
not ideal.
A bad day out. Anyway, we're moving on now, and definitely very much a shift in tone, I believe.
Yes, indeed. And keep your views coming in. GBviews at GBnews. What do you think about the fact that taxpayers' money is now going towards tackling obesity, severe obesity in kids 2 and above, age 2 and above? Let us know. But for now, our top story of the day. GB News understands the terrorist bomber killed when his device exploded in the back of a Liverpool taxi was not known to the security services. Ahmad al-Swilmeen died when his device detonated in the vehicle as it pulled up to the front of Liverpool Women's Hospital. This was on Sunday morning. He's an asylum seeker from the Middle East who had an original application to stay in the country rejected in 2014, and al-Swilmeen rented a flat about a mile from the hospital in recent weeks.
Well, that property on Rutland Avenue, which is where he's believed to have assembled his bomb, remains sealed off this morning. The 4 men arrested on Sunday and into Monday have now all been released. Well, GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White joins us from Liverpool. Mark, thank you very much again. Just whiz us through all of the latest, please.
Yes, well, the 4 men, all aged under 30, who had been arrested in the hours after this attack took place outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital, have now been questioned and released. As I say, that is not unusual. What often happens in the aftermath of a terrorist incident is once the authorities find out who the main suspect or suspects are, then they delve into the background, and that takes them always to the place where that person's lived, their family home, associates, friends of theirs, all will be often taken into police custody in the hours and days after an attack like this, questioned to determine really whether they had any knowledge of what was going on, whether they may have indeed been part of the plot or maybe planning something themselves. And the vast majority of those who are questioned are often released without charge. But it is still a fast-paced investigation this morning as the authorities try to determine whether there is any wider threat. They haven't yet concluded that. We know that the terror threat level has been increased to severe. That's the second highest terror threat level. If it went to critical, that would mean we were right in the middle of a series of terrorist attacks and that an attack was imminent. Severe means an attack is highly likely, that the authorities, having witnessed obviously that attack last month with the death of Sir David Amess, the Conservative MP in Essex, and then this one just weeks later in Liverpool, know that there is real potential for other attacks. I have to say, Patrick, they have been warning for some time about the potential of an uptick in terrorist activity as we come out of lockdown, because a lot of people who have been perhaps radicalised in recent months in their bedrooms, on the internet, being exposed to individuals often in the Middle East, part of groups like Islamic State, ISIS, or indeed Al-Qaeda, although these groups have been degraded to some extent by coalition activity in Syria and Iraq in the last year or two. They are still operating, they are regrouping to some extent, but also the propaganda arm of these terrorist organisations has never been fully degraded. There are still individuals all around the globe trying to encourage young men, often vulnerable, impressionable young men, to go off and to carry out these attacks in the name of their warped interpretation of whatever ideology they are part of.
Mark, thank you very much for that report. I think Neil firmly hit on the head there as well when it comes to the fact that potentially during lockdown we've ended up with these people just sitting there, getting radicalised, and are we unfortunately about to see the results of that now? Mark, thank you very much. Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, on the scene there for us in Liverpool, as he will be throughout the day.
Yes, now let's talk to Patrick Mercer, former Conservative Shadow Homeland Security spokesman, who served in both Northern Ireland and Bosnia and was awarded an MBE in recognition of distinguished service in Northern Ireland. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. It's on one hand great that we're not talking to you under more tragic circumstances in which a member of the public has been killed by this terrorist. It was only him, of course, who died in this incident. But what do you make of what this means, the significance of this particular incident for the security of the country?
Well, good morning, Mercy. I mean, it's a real problem. If you have an organisation, a cell of terrorists, then one of them or more than one of them is always going to be loosely lipped. That's a great advantage for the security forces. However, lone wolf attacks, and I suspect that that's what this is. I suspect that the attack on Sir David Amess, a friend of mine, was also a lone wolf attack. That's, by definition, extremely secure, extremely difficult to interdict, and potentially very, very dangerous. And that's why, in some ways, it's a good thing that this gentleman was not known to MI5. If he had been known to MI5, of course, people would be saying, well, why wasn't he tracked down before he did it? It's not as simple as that.
No, it's not. I mean, I think there are serious question marks as well, though, over, how easy it is, or potentially, to make a bomb. And, I mean, goodness knows, again, how you can combat that, because, it's got various components, and presumably you can buy all of those components separately. So, it's obviously that's a massive concern. I'm just going to ask you what I asked a gentleman that we had on earlier, actually, which is about when someone has their asylum application denied, do you not think it's a risk to national security to keep them in this country for as long as we sometimes do? I understand there's due legal process that needs to be taken place, but surely that is a risk.
Yeah, of course it is, Patrick. It's the most appalling risk. And it's something which we've got to try and balance in terms of our expenditure that we do on security, that we put out there on security. And similarly, the amount of resources we got. But let's not forget, we're fighting the woke brigade on this one. And the woke brigade, of course, dominates so much of our politics and so much of our media. It's extremely hard for security to overcome those sorts of interpretation.
Yeah, well, it is indeed, really. I mean, absolutely. It's a very, very risky situation, clearly, for everyone involved. And just lastly, what do you make of the government now saying essentially, look, hey, just make sure you're vigilant. We will not kowtow down to terrorists. And could the government potentially be doing a little bit more to reassure us? We've had slashed police numbers and a big song and dance about replacing those police numbers. We have got an ongoing issue in the Channel, and we don't know who a lot of these people are, for example. What do you think about this? Is it time for the government to do a bit more for us?
Again, Patrick, it's very hard. The government just spent huge sums of money combating COVID, the realities of which let's not go into just at the moment. The point about terrorism is it doesn't go away. It just doesn't. The terrorist usually wins eventually. So how much resource do we actually dedicate to this? We've got to balance, of course, these very, very mercifully very rare attacks against the fact that we must not terrify people. Obviously, I've been involved in this sort of thing, and it's a very difficult balance to strike. What you'll find, though, shortly, is that a minister or a senior police officer or someone like that will come on the screen and say, this is a wake-up call. I'm sick to the pit of my stomach with hearing wake-up calls over the last 20-odd years. We shouldn't need to wake up. We should be constantly alert and constantly using the right amount of resource to combat this.
Patrick Mercer, thank you so much for joining us this morning to discuss that incident. Thanks.
Yes, indeed. Wake-up calls, thoughts and prayers,
Yeah.
How many more times, eh? How many more times? But we're going to go into my inbox now. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Lots of reaction to Mercy's monologue on, let's call it what it is, fat kids.
I was avoiding using that term.
Oh, there we go. Anyway, so to say that it's difficult to eat a healthy diet on a low income is just an excuse. It is far cheaper to eat fruit and vegetables throughout the year when in season than to eat junk food that many people consume. And that's from Peter. It's not an uncommon view, that. There's a lot here.
And there's a lot, I find, I grew up in a very working class community, grew up with a single parent who very often didn't have the money to sort of feed us and herself. So I do understand these issues. But what I have always found is that there's a lot of people in low-income communities often sort of resort to having takeaways and food that actually, whilst it might seem cheaper at the time, when you sort of have that kind of thing every day stretched out over a week, you might find that actually it would have been cheaper to perhaps buy the ingredients and make it at home, because takeaways are actually quite expensive.
What about some people who would say, hey, look, maybe in a single-parent background, mum or dad have got 2 jobs, maybe 3 jobs, they haven't got the time to cook for their kids?
Well, yeah, that is true. But again, I would say that my issue isn't with sort of ready-made meals or whatever necessarily. You can still get frozen foods that are very quick to make, which don't, cost an arm and a leg these days. And there are specialist chains who make frozen food for low-income people, thankfully. So maybe it is about just informing people about how they can get around trying to eat healthy on a low income. But I don't, propose for 1 second to have the answers or to make this an easy issue.
Unfortunately, people do not know how to shop and cook from scratch. Parents need to have access to how to cook, so I think a bit more education is what Jenny is calling for there. And indeed, more education is what John's calling for as well. Thank you very much for both of you getting in touch. When I was at school, male and female pupils had lessons in both cooking and looking after a bank account. Gosh, I could do with lessons in both of those things, goodness me. These days, we seem to spend more time politically indoctrinating kids.
Yeah, the thing I found, actually, is that private school children often get financial lessons from very early, from private school kids, even from primary school. people to managing their money and all that kind of thing.
I must
and
have that day.
And that's not something at all I've ever seen in sort of state school. So it's those little things, I think, that build up eventually to make it that when people are sort of on a low income, they don't know necessarily how to manage their money and particularly eat healthily on a low budget.
Yes, indeed. Now, just moving away from that, I just want to get to one of your views on the Liverpool incident, because they have been flooding in thick and fast, let's be honest with you. Please tell me how someone's from Maxine. Please tell me how someone who has his asylum application declined can still remain in this country for another 7 years. That's not right. He should have been deported shortly. And just quickly, someone has actually sent me online an article, a link to an article that appeared in The Independent not so long ago, where basically it was supposedly advice from ISIS to, say, pretend to be a Christian if you're in the country. And obviously,
well, we'll get to more of your views after a short break. Coming up, thousands of overweight children, as we were saying, are set to be sent to NHS clinics under a pilot scheme in a bid to tackle the obesity crisis. So we'll have more on this on our feature, The Controversy. But first, the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Another largely cloudy day out there. A bit of brightness here and there, but most places staying fairly dull. There's some wet weather crossing Scotland. Also pretty windy here as well. The isobars squeezing together close to this little area of low pressure. Further south, high pressure is nearby. There's a week-old weather front. This one, though, is a little more lively, and it is bringing rain, not just to Scotland, actually, but for a time. We're going to see a spell of rain crossing Northern Ireland, but it should peter out through the afternoon. Meanwhile, across Scotland, the rain will continue across western areas. The east may not see much of that rain until late on, but it is very blustery as well. Further south, the winds are light. That old weather front may be providing a bit of drizzle here and there, but generally dry, but fairly dull, but mild, with temperatures again climbing into the teens. Through this evening, we'll see a bit of that rain just trickling into northern England, maybe across parts of Wales before it fizzles out. Lots of showers then coming into Scotland, a few for Northern Ireland, staying blustery here as well. A bit of snow on the tops of the mountains across Scotland. But elsewhere, the skies tend to clear and it turns a bit chilly. Temperatures well down into single figures. But does make for a brighter day tomorrow, certainly for most of England and Wales. A few showers, certainly early on over northwest England, and showers will keep going through the day across western Scotland. A few for Northern Ireland as well, but many areas here will be dry, and certainly across much of the southern half of the UK, it's a dry, fine day with decent spells of sunshine, a bit of a breeze and a slightly cooler feel, but still these temperatures are pretty close to average for the time of year. Through Wednesday evening, we'll start to see a bit more cloud spilling into Northern Ireland, turning a little bit damp and drizzly, and that rain will push into western Scotland, where it will linger through much of the rest of this week, through Thursday and Friday as well. But elsewhere, staying largely dry through the rest of this week. Lots of cloud around, and again, it's going to turn milder, but perhaps things turning colder through the weekend.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Hello, I am Simon Pusey. Here are the latest headlines. The former Yorkshire county cricketer Azim Rafiq says racism in cricket is worse than in society. He's been appearing before MPs to discuss allegations of institutional racism at the club. An investigation by Yorkshire concluded Mr Rafiq was a victim of racial harassment and bullying, but nobody was disciplined. The club's former chairman, Roger Hutton, who quit in the aftermath of the row, will also give evidence to the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee. Manchester City footballer Benjamin Mendy has been charged with 2 additional counts of rape. The 27-year-old is now facing 6 counts and 1 of sexual assault, which relate to 4 people over the age of 16. NHS organisations have been asked to review their security arrangements after the Liverpool terrorist attack. The 4 men arrested in relation to the taxi explosion have now all been released from police custody. The bombing suspect, who died in Sunday's car blast, has been named as 32-year-old Ahmad al-Sway al-Amin. The driver, David Perry, escaped with minor injuries. The terrorism threat level in the UK has been increased to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. NHS leaders are calling for social care staff to be given cash bonuses to stop them from leaving for other jobs in the winter. They want the government to offer £500 incentives so they don't take Christmas work in hospitality, supermarkets or firms like Amazon. The sector already has more than 100,000 vacancies. A 3.1 magnitude earthquake shook western Scotland just before 2 a.m. last night. Its epicentre was 11 miles off the town of Loch Gilphead, northwest of Glasgow. People as far as Edinburgh and Ballycastle in Northern Ireland reported they had felt the tremor. Well, you're right up to date. I'll be back with more of all today's main stories at the top of the hour.
Good morning, everybody. You're watching To The Point on GB News. Now, thousands of severely obese children could be sent to new NHS fat camps. This measure to combat spiralling obesity rates. 15 specialist clinics have been set up across England, and they will treat children aged between 2 and 18 who are severely overweight and even at risk of deadly complications, including heart attacks, strokes and diabetes, despite, of course, their young age.
Good grief. Well, Director of Fatnosis, a weight management model and former presenter who has helped thousands lose weight, is Steve Miller. And he doesn't like to mince his words, this guy, so strap yourselves in, ladies and gentlemen.
No.
Steve, what do you make of all these fat kids?
Listen, the only thing I don't mince is my words, and a lot of people these days do mince their words, don't they? Shall we start with some statistics for the viewers?
Yes,
right?
ground us in
so
fact.
Here you go. I've done some research this morning. This is startling figures, seriously. Number of obese kids needing NHS urgent treatment has doubled in 5 years. Oversized kids potentially at risk of sleep apnea, it can be fatal. That's doubled in 5 years. 271% rise in stomach reflux cases linked to being overweight in kids.
Great.
And diabetes is up 259%. So are these fat camps a good idea? Well, the first thing to say is I am amazed you've not been inundated with people saying, oh, this is fat shaming. My goodness, you know. But of course
It's the wrong news channel for that kind of interaction.
Yes. I think that's, you're confusing us with the Beeb. But I actually did a monologue on this about, I don't know, 40 minutes ago or something. And I said, look, first of all, let's blame the parents perhaps a little bit more. Let's stop shifting the blame away from parents and onto the state, because we seem to want to just say, oh, well...
Listen, can I just say this to you? This is why I absolutely love you. Because you are one of the very few people on the telly that say it as it is. Are parents the number one culprits? Absolutely true. They are the role models. And all of this claptrap that, it's too expensive to eat healthily. No, it's not. And in fact, there is a study out there that shows it's cheaper to eat healthily. I think that what we've got are too many parents suffering with can't be bothered-itis. And actually, what we need in this country is something much more direct that actually says things such as, if your child is too fat, they are on death row, sort it out. Yeah? We have this problem in this country. Now, this is the serious point here. This is really dangerous, because what we're doing is developing a nation where we are normalizing obesity. And we even celebrate fat models on a catwalk and say, oh, isn't it beautiful? You should love your body and love your fat. Well, I say we do not want children singing, if you're happy and you're fat, clap your hands. Thank you very much.
No, I can understand that. Do you think more needs to be done in schools, perhaps, as well? I mean, look, I haven't got a child in the primary school system at the moment, but I'm acutely aware of some of the things that are being spoken about in schools, whether or not they've been born into the right body. Well, what about looking after their own body?
Listen, no one's fat in a famine. So all this genetics rubbish is rubbish, right? The second thing I'd like to say is, actually, the schools already do teach about nutrition. And, what we love in this country is to point this finger. We love to point a finger, don't we, and say, it's you that's made them like this, or the school should be doing more, or the government, it's the government's fault. I say no. And actually, it is a parent's responsibility to look after the health of their children. And if you're not prepared to do it, do not have children. I think that's logical common sense. And you've only got to go into some of these fast food restaurants where you see evidently overweight parents shoveling it in front of their children and allowing their poor kids to be, frankly, overfed. We used to say that underfeeding children was cruelty. I now say overfeeding children is cruelty.
Absolutely.
And it's about time that we got a bit of a grip in this country, because we're losing the plot fast.
Yes, indeed. And the other aspect of this is the lack of physical activity that many children do. I mean, I mentioned in my monologue earlier, let's be honest and say some children spend their free time just sitting in front of a PlayStation for hours on end, or in front of an iPad. I mean, I see certainly young children, preschool children, sitting in front of just glued to the face to a screen. That needs to come into play as well, doesn't it? We do need to say, if you're going to let your child sit in front of a screen for hours on end without giving them some fresh air and without encouraging them to go out and do something, then that is also going to lead to your child, developing weight problems.
Oh, without a doubt. And again, I think for some, don't get me wrong, there are many parents out there that do a fantastic job when it comes to managing the obesity of their children and stuff. So let me be balanced here. However, there are too many parents that love the kids to be in the bedroom playing on the latest computer game or whatever, because it gives them a quiet life. And, that is the reality. And when I sit down with parents, as I do, and talk to them about, I sort of say, come on, tell me the truth. And you get to the truth, and actually, they're not doing enough to be the role model. That is a big thing in the UK. Yeah, but of course, we're all too scared to talk about it. We're all too scared to say, using the word fat is becoming very questionable. I mean, a lot of people don't like the word fat. That's why I was surprised with Fat Camp that you didn't get inundated with people saying, oh, this is horrendous.
Yes, well, absolutely. You could call it Blubber Group, I suppose, could you? Or something like that.
You look like you were getting bored of me then. You getting bored of me? You look like you were nodding off me talking to you.
No, I sometimes look down to check my emails to see what the reaction is, and actually we've had loads of people. The guy on the telly right now should have his own show, being one of them. So think about that before you dig me out next time. But seriously though, you mentioned earlier about parents potentially having can't be bothered-itis. So being a bit lazy, being a bit, we do have a world now potentially where parents might have to go and work a couple of jobs, or especially single parent families or whatever like that. I mean, let's be honest, it's not always easy, is it, for parents?
Well, listen, I'm sure you do as well. I know parents that do work full-time and they work in very demanding jobs, but their kids aren't fat. So actually, there is a way to do it. And it is about forward planning. It is about pre-preparing meals, freezing meals, all that sort of thing. And what I would say to parents is, do not tease your children if they're fat, because that's not on. It is not on. But and live 80-20. Eating 80% healthily and 20% a bit of what you fancy, and nurture that as a family, but also be the role models. And if you're all too fat, let's not make it doom and gloom. Let's make it some sort of family mission so you can move forward positively.
Well, Steve Miller, Director of Fatnosis, a weight management model and former presenter, thank you for joining us this morning to discuss that. We'll discuss that controversial issue. Let's be honest.
I like that guy.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
I think he should shoot from the hip. He's a
yeah,
straight
you
shooter.
have to be. Not enough people do these days,
No.
and that's the problem. But anyway, after the break, our South East of England reporter, Ellie Costello, will bring us the latest from the Channel migrant crisis. But before that, let's take a quick break.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Now, the Home Secretary has begun crisis talks with France over the English Channel migrant crisis, vowing to stop 100% of migrant crossings. Thousands of migrants are currently living on the edge of Dunkirk in France, waiting to attempt the crossing. There's been a surge in crossing attempts over the past 2 weeks, with a record 1,185 Channel migrants reaching the UK in one 24-hour period, while the Home Secretary was due to meet Interior Ministers Gerald Darmanin in person yesterday, but cancelled her Paris trip following a suicide bombing outside Liverpool Women's Hospital. We've been bringing you details on that incident. Now, our host, South East of England reporter Ellie Costello has more from Dover.
There was a meeting late last night between Priti Patel and her French counterpart, Gérald Darmanin, and it came after a record-breaking week last week for migrant crossings across the English Channel. 1,185 people crossed in a single day last Thursday. That was only 8 days after the previous record, where 853 people crossed in a single day the week before. So this is what we're seeing, record after record, week after week after week, and we're now in mid-November and there's no signs of those numbers easing. I don't know how much you can see of the water behind me, but it's very still and very calm. That's one of the reasons why we have seen quite so many people crossing in November. It hasn't been seen before. This is usually only something we see in the height of the summer, but that's one of the reasons why this late night meeting was called between Priti Patel and her French counterpart. And we have a joint statement that's been released from that meeting. It says that UK and French authorities are determined to prevent 100% of crossings over the Channel. They say they want to make the route unviable for migrants hoping to enter Britain from France. It was also agreed that there was going to be a joint technical working group, and they're going to meet imminently to work together with a view of using new technology to stop those crossings as rapidly as possible. And the two ministers also committed to reinforcing intelligence, to sharing their intelligence, and also the British police and the French police cooperating together to stop those crossings from happenings. That is a very joined up approach there. They seem to be singing from the same hymn sheet. It isn't really something that we have heard before. Priti Patel was actually supposed to go and meet Gérald Darmanin today. She hasn't done so because of what has happened in Liverpool, but I'd also say that she seemed to be quite happy with how the meeting happened yesterday, the fact that they both agreed that these crossings needed to be stopped and it needed that cooperative action of both Britain and France in order for that to happen. Now this morning, the day after the night before, we are hearing that action is already being taken on the French coast. The French Interior Minister has tweeted saying that 13 alleged people smugglers have been arrested in Dunkirk this morning, and he also tweeted to say that a makeshift migrant camp near Calais is being dismantled as we speak. There are thousands of migrants there, migrants that were looking to make the trip from France over to Britain. So there's some action on the French coast this morning as a direct result of that meeting last night, and certainly a crackdown on the criminal gangs that are operating on the French coast, those criminal gangs that put the people into dinghies, often charging thousands of pounds to get them over to Britain. And it's going to be very interesting to see in the next few weeks what this new joint-up cooperative approach between the British and the French will have on those numbers looking to cross the Channel.
Amelia Harper, Ellie Costello, reporting about the Channel crisis. And as she said there, it would be interesting to see what the Home Secretary Priti Patel and her French counterparts will do to resolve this issue, because as we say, crossings are now running at 3 times what they were for the whole of last year now. So very concerning situation for many.
Yeah, absolutely. She's vowed to end this, hasn't she? But it's not the first time that we've heard that. Well, detectives have begun excavating an area of parkland in Kettering in Northamptonshire after receiving significant intelligence after the disappearance of a 14-year-old girl 21 years ago.
Yep, Sarah Benford was last seen on April the 6th, 2000, before a murder probe was launched 3 years later. A number of suspects have been arrested since the disappearance, but nobody has been charged. Northamptonshire police say specialist search teams and forensic archaeologists will begin excavating and urge anyone with new information to contact them on 101, quoting incident number 359.
Well, police say that they've received credible information that Sarah's remains may be buried at Valley Walk in Kettering. So our reporter, Balvinda Sidhu, has sent us this update.
I'm in Valley Walk in Kettering, where Northamptonshire Police have sectioned off an area which they will be digging over the next 2 weeks. They are investigating the murder and disappearance of Sarah Benford, who went missing more than 20 years ago. She was last seen leaving her care home in Northampton, and despite a lengthy investigation and a search of several areas, including London, Kettering and Wales, she has never been found. Sarah was just 14 when she went missing, and of course police believe that this is an area of significance. They've been given a tip-off by a member of the local community.
So we got some information that suggested she may be buried very close to where we stand now. We looked at the credibility of that in light of everything we knew, and we assessed that information as credible enough to launch what you see here is a significant operation to dig up a number of locations within the taped off area where we believe Sarah might be located. What we intend to do is dig in a manner that is forensically sound. So if we find Sarah, we have got forensic archaeologists, a forensic post-mortem on standby, and we will be digging her up and her remains up in a really sensitive manner, as you'd expect, both so we can deliver her back to her family, but so we can identify any forensic links with those that killed her, with those that buried her, so that we can identify those that are responsible for her being kept away from her family for all this time. This has been more than 2 decades. 2 decades without knowing what happened to your 14-year-old daughter must have been horrific for them. And that's why we're here today, first and foremost, to provide answers to her mum, to her friends, to her family, and the local community, really. This is an investigation that captured the community, that the community still care about, and Northamptonshire Police still care about. We want to provide the answers, predominantly to her family, as to what happened to her and how she died.
So the area that they've sectioned off at Valley Walk is 70 metres by 70 metres. They have built up a huge fence around it to keep it out of public view. This is a popular area used by dog walkers, and of course they don't want anybody to access the site because there will be forensic examinations going on over the next 2 weeks. They'll be excavating the land. They've got forensic archaeologists on site. They believe, like I said before, it's an area of significance, and they hope that they will find what they've been looking for more than 20 years, so that they can offer Sarah's family and friends the closure they've been waiting for.
Balvinder Sidhu there giving us the update on that case that has been reopened. Well, it was a cold case, but the police are now excavating an area after receiving some intelligence.
Indeed. Well, look, we'll end with a bit of a lighter story now. A terminally ill man who was arrested for mooning a speed camera believes Banksy is behind a new mural near his home depicting police challenging Bart Simpson for baring his bottom. You love to see it. Daryl Meekham hit the headlines last week after footage showed him being wrestled to the ground by 6 police officers who should be ashamed of themselves for pulling a cheeky little stunt in Kidderminster. Now, the 55-year-old said it was on his bucket list to show his backside to a speed camera, but a police officer who witnessed it failed to see the funny side and reported him for indecent exposure.
Yes, well, now this graffiti piece we're showing you there on the screen appeared to refer to the incident, and it's emerged in a subway in Kidderminster, and Mr Meekham believes famous artist Banksy is behind it, while the street artwork shows Bart Simpson with his shorts pulled down, as you can see, exposing his bottom, and 2 police officers raising their batons to strike the cartoon character.
Yes, indeed. I think this is fantastic stuff and indeed should be widely commended. But, of course, there is another view, which is that this man did get naked in public and that's a crime.
Yes, exactly, which is my view. It did split people.
Quite well, yeah, that's not. Yes, it quite literally drives a crackdown society, doesn't it? But yes, no, it was... Look, in my opinion, it was on this guy's bucket list. The poor bloke's terminally ill. He's not killed anyone. He's not harmed anyone. Also, in that particular area as well, you know, the police haven't covered themselves in glory with various other things that they were a bit slow to get hold of.
Well, we've got 1 minute to just go quickly to your views as well, just to wrap up the show. We've had lots on the agenda today, so let's get your views in.
Yes, right, OK, so lots going on in about the channel. Priti Patel is full of promises and no actions. I personally would appoint Andrew Bridgen. That's from Eve. There you go, strong stuff, Eve. I mean, that'll be a change, let me tell you. Why don't we? They agree when they land that the border force will take them straight back to France. That would show that they are being straight with us. That's that's Mike there getting in touch about what's going on in the Channel as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your views for today. That is it from us. But don't go away. Up next is the briefing with Gloria De Piero. But first, the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Another largely cloudy day out there. A bit of brightness here and there, but most places staying fairly dull. There's some wet weather crossing Scotland. Also pretty windy here as well. The isobars squeezing together close to this little area of low pressure. Further south, high pressure is nearby. There's a week-old weather front. This one, though, is a little more lively and it is bringing rain, not just to Scotland, actually, but for a time. We're going to see a spell of rain crossing Northern Ireland, but it should peter out through the afternoon. Meanwhile, across Scotland, the rain will continue across western areas. The east may not see much of that rain until late on, but it is very blustery as well. Further south, the winds are light. That old weather front may be providing a bit of drizzle here and there, but generally dry, but fairly dull, but mild, with temperatures again climbing into the teens. Through this evening, we'll see a bit of that rain just trickling into northern England, maybe across parts of Wales before it fizzles out. Lots of showers then coming into Scotland, a few for Northern Ireland, staying blustery here as well, a bit of snow on the tops of the mountains across Scotland. But elsewhere, the skies tend to clear and it turns a bit chilly. Temperatures well down into single figures, but it does make for a brighter day tomorrow, certainly for most of England and Wales. A few showers, certainly early on over northwest England, and showers will keep going through the day across western Scotland. A few for Northern Ireland as well, but many areas here will be dry, and certainly across much of the southern half of the UK, it's a dry, fine day with decent spells of sunshine, a bit of a breeze and a slightly cooler feel, but still these temperatures are pretty close to average for the time of year. Through Wednesday evening, we'll start to see a bit more cloud spilling into Northern Ireland, turning a little bit damp and drizzly, and that rain will push into western Scotland, where it will linger through much of the rest of this week, through Thursday and Friday as well. But elsewhere, staying largely dry through the rest of this week. Lots of cloud around, and again, it's going to turn milder, but perhaps things turning colder through the weekend.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
And welcome to the briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Lots coming up today, including the latest on the terror attack in Liverpool. MPs are debating second jobs, And we're talking the latest row over discharging raw sewage into our rivers and waterways. But first, it's the news.
Hello, I'm Simon Pusey. This is your news at 12 o'clock. The former Yorkshire County cricketer Azim Rafiq says racism in cricket is worse than in society. He appeared before MPs to discuss allegations of institutional racism at the Yorkshire County Cricket Club. An investigation by Yorkshire concluded Mr Rafiq was a victim of racial harassment and bullying, but nobody was disciplined. Mr Rafiq told MPs that his son's death was part of what drove him to speak out.
I've seen other players have family tragedies and get support beyond measure, and I've just carried my son from the hospital to the graveyard, and how I'm getting treated here is not right. And to me it became very clear that even myself, that I'd been looking the other way, and there's a real problem here, not just Yorkshire, throughout the country, and I'm going to be the one that's going to speak about this.
Azim Rafiq speaking a little earlier. Now, NHS organisations have been asked to review their security arrangements after the Liverpool terrorist attack. The 4 men arrested in relation to the taxi explosion have now been released from police custody. The bombing suspect, who died in Sunday's blast, has been named as 32-year-old Emad al-Swelalamin. The driver, David Perry, survived the incident and has since been discharged from hospital. The terrorism threat level in the UK has also been increased to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. Minister for Security and Borders, Damien Hines, told GB News people should be as vigilant as possible.
If you see something that doesn't look right, something that makes you suspicious about something, just to go that extra mentally, go that extra distance to say, yeah, I should report that. And if it turns out to not be significant, then nothing's been lost.
Manchester City footballer Benjamin Mendy has been charged with 2 additional counts of rape. The 27-year-old is now facing 6 counts and 1 of sexual assault, which relate to 4 people over the age of 16. He'll appear at Stockport Magistrates Court tomorrow. A debate and vote on MPs' conduct is on in the Commons agenda this afternoon. Last night, an attempt to scrap the controversial standards reforms that sparked Westminster's sleaze row was blocked by Conservative MP Christopher Chope. Former Labour MP Stephen Pound told GB News that sleaze is endemic.
And there are some people who are still trying to justify with this most sort of egregious nonsense, this risible theory that somehow, having being a spokesperson for a hedge fund actually adds lustre to the cluster, actually makes you somehow a better MP. Absolute nonsense.
The Prime Minister's father has been accused of inappropriately touching a Tory MP and a journalist. Caroline Noakes MP said Stanley Johnson smacked her on the backside in 2003 and Alva Ray claimed he groped her in 2019. Mr Johnson declined to comment but says he has no recollection of Caroline Noakes at all. NHS leaders are calling for social care staff to be given cash bonuses to stop them leaving for other jobs in the winter. They want the government to offer £500 incentives so they don't take Christmas work in hospitality, supermarkets or firms like Amazon. Those working in care homes must now be double vaccinated. The sector already has more than 100,000 vacancies. The majority of school staff, parents and students believe GCSEs need to be reformed. A poll by the Headmasters and Headmistresses Conference found that more than half say GCSEs require serious reform and 40% believe they need some adjustment. It reported significant concern that both the curriculum and assessment are falling short in serving the needs of young people. Director of the School's Advice Service, Bernadette John, told GB News the current system needs to be modernised.
What children really need now is to be able to properly assess and weigh up information and decide whether the source can be relied on and how accurate and valuable a piece of information that is. They don't need to be walking encyclopedias.
Obesity levels among younger children rose significantly after lockdown. That's the latest from the National Childhood Measurement Programme. Official figures show that now almost 1 in 7 children start primary school obese, and more than a quarter are obese by the time they finish primary school. And an original Star Wars poster is among hundreds of iconic film memorabilia going under the hammer. Fans across the world will battle it out to bid for items worth more than £250,000 during a 2-day auction. The Empire Strikes Back concept movie poster by Josh Kirby is expected to sell for up to £8,000. And that's all your news for now. I'll have more in about half an hour. About now, back to the briefing with Gloria Del Piero.
We've got a packed show today. Coming up this hour on The Briefing, as the police name the man who was killed when his homemade bomb went off outside Liverpool Women's Hospital, we talked to Brendan Cox, whose wife, the Labour MP Jo Cox, was killed by a domestic terrorist, and who says one of the reasons these people kill is for notoriety, and he's now urging the media not to show his image or name him. And we talked to the Labour MP who says the rules around flood prevention are a mess and who's calling for a complete overhaul of the regulations. Plus, MPs are debating the rights and wrongs of second jobs again. After one Tory MP, to the fury of many of his parliamentary colleagues, I suspect all, objected to a motion accepting findings over Owen Paterson, thus throwing the sleaze issue squarely back on top of the political agenda. We'll have that story for you. And after MPs voted last month to allow water companies to continue discharging raw sewage into our rivers, a public petition calling for a ban has hit over 100,000 signatures. MPs have debated the issue again this week. We talked to the MP who led that debate. Give me your political briefings, send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Our top story. Police have named the man killed when his homemade bomb went off in an explosion outside Liverpool Women's Hospital on Sunday. In a moment, I'll be speaking to Brendan Cox, whose wife, Labour MP, and my friend Jo Cox was murdered by a domestic terrorist in 2016. Brendan has first-hand experience of how the horror of terrorism can shatter lives. But first, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has this report.
As dramatic as these pictures are, authorities know Sunday's explosion outside this hospital could have been so much worse. If the bomber had managed to fully detonate his device inside the building, it's highly likely there would have been many casualties. But thanks to the quick reaction of local taxi driver David Perry, that bomber, Ahmed Al-Swilmeen, was locked in the back of the car. Coming just weeks after Conservative MP Sir David Amess was stabbed to death in an apparent act of terrorism in Essex, this explosion has persuaded security analysts that the terror threat level should be raised to severe.
It is a reminder that the threat is there, that an attack is highly likely to be being plotted or planned. And so, therefore, we need to be alert. Anybody, obviously, who has information about this incident, please contact the police or Crime Stoppers anonymously if you prefer. But also, more generally, if you're suspicious about something, if something doesn't seem right, then please report it, because our counter-terrorism effort, the amazing work done by our brave law enforcement and security service, they rely on all of us for the information to help them to do their work.
At Rutland Avenue, just over a mile from the scene of the taxi explosion, police are sifting through what sources have told us is likely to have been the bomb factory where the device was assembled. Al-Swilmeen had only just started renting this property in recent weeks. Back at the hospital, the scene of the blast, there is also still intense police activity. As forensic teams continue to sift through the remains of the taxi, a priority for counter-terrorism detectives is trying to establish the makeup of the device, where the ingredients came from, how it was constructed, and crucially, whether there are any other devices still out there. Elsewhere, a controlled explosion was carried out in a field in nearby Sefton Park, which police say is linked to Sunday's attack.
There is no specific threat to the area, but I have asked for patrols to be increased right across Merseyside. Incidents such as this are very rare, but I would ask people to remain calm, but also be vigilant and alert.
Police say there is no specific intelligence of any other planned attacks. Authorities say there will be increased police activity at rail stations and other key buildings in urban centres across the country in the days and weeks ahead. Mark White, GB News, Liverpool.
Joining me now is Brendan Cox. His wife, the Labour MP Jo Cox, was murdered by a terrorist in 2016 and has founded Survivors Against Terror to help families and survivors of terrorism get the rights they deserve. Brendan, welcome. It's good to see you. Before we talk about the substantive issue, just tell us about this group you founded, Survivors Against Terror, and some of the people that you work with.
So there's now about 300 of us, and they are people who have either been bereaved or seriously injured in terror attacks, either on UK citizens overseas or on any citizens in the UK. So that network ranges from people who lost loved ones in IRA bombings back in the 1970s through to the most recent, some of the most recent attacks. And what that group is about is really trying to do two things. One, to make sure that survivors get